John, what are your top five winners of the draft and top five losers of the draft this year?
Oh, five. Cowboys, Jets, Giants, Vikings, and let's think of one more. Perhaps I guess the Steelers kind of sat back and watched and did appropriate things. So I'll stick with Steelers. Those are my top five winners. And I wish I could say nicer things about the Raiders because I did like the first pick. But let's just go with the Raiders. I think the biggest loser overall was a fight between the Falcons and the Packers. The Falcons I thought were just made the wrong choices. Like they kind of sat there playing for mediocrity as opposed to winning or getting better. It was a really strange approach. And the Packers in general had a vision, but that vision is clearly the one that Kyle Shanahan beat into their heads in 2 wins last year and just trying to become that offense. The Falcons Packers were tied for first overall. To be honest, I'm not sure I even have a fourth and a fifth, but those three I mentioned stand out as the biggest losers for sure.
Raiders were mine.
Apologies to their fan bases.
The Raiders were mine, so I'm glad you brought that one up. John,
Yeah.
In terms of the later round picks, the day 3 draft picks, whether it's a scheme or a skill set or even just a fit for a team, do you think there's any day 3 draft picks that you think could have a big year, maybe a rookie of the year candidate, or even just a great NFL career?
It's so hard because, the day 3 capital is kind of when we forget about players and it's hard for them to make the roster. But I think a sneaky one that we can watch, even if it's just for fantasy football or maybe taking over, is Eno Benjamin by the Cardinals in the 7th round. And it's simply because Kenyon Drake is still on this 1-year franchise deal. And I know they've discussed a long-term plan, but who knows if that actually happens since Chase Edmonds is also still on a rookie deal. Eno Benjamin was a guy who was touted as a 4th or 5th round prospect. So still day 3, but he was valued much higher. And the Cardinals essentially only took them because he should have been gone earlier and he was still there. So if Kenyon Drake, for whatever reason, can't get a deal worked out in 2020, Eno Benjamin is a guy who in 2021 would become of value to them and maybe make a career for himself.
We are talking to analyst and writer for Roto World NFL, John Daigle. John, I've been talking about this draft really throughout the last week. We've been going up and down the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and fifth round, and everybody says you find your players really in the third and up. That's the real careers. A lot of these NFL teams and these NFL players have their careers in the third, the fourth, and the fifth rounds. So I saw a lot of teams, really, how can I say this? Really reach in the first round.
Especially late, yeah.
And you said that you loved the Oakland Raiders' first pick in Ruggs. They had a chance to get Judy. They had a chance to get CeeDee Lamb. Why do you think Ruggs is the better pick out of both wide receivers?
So it depends on, so Ruggs made sense for the Raiders because they always value speed. And they showed this last year. They didn't really draft guys with athletic profiles. They didn't care that they went to the combine and jumped 41.5-inch verticals and did anything else, 25 reps on the bench. They literally only cared about 4.2, 4.3 speed and being a captain in college. So we kind of linked them to Henry Ruggs. But Ruggs is so much better than just a deep prospect. I understand that was his profile, an explosive Tyreek Hill-like player at Alabama, although he was playing around, 3 other NFL prospects in Jerry Jeudy and Devion Smith. But the fact is Ruggs is also just an underneath guy. And if you are, in fact, moving forward with Derek Carr and maybe the Marcus Mariota signing, giving him $7.5 million guaranteed, maybe we should look into that more and think, okay, maybe they aren't moving with Derek Carr forward. But right now, he's the starter. And a guy like Henry Ruggs who works well underneath in the flats, since we know Derek Carr, since his 2017 back injury, hasn't gone deep at all. 30th among all quarterbacks in that span to just chunk 15-plus yards downfield. It's not his iota anymore. And so I think Henry Ruggs actually fits with them. Maybe if they had offers, they could have traded back because we're really nitpicking for going Ruggs, CeeDee Lamb, and Jerry Jeudy, who the other two went 15 and 17 overall. But I think Ruggs is a good fit with Derek Carr. And the other additions they made, by the way, Lynn Bowden, who was a bowl MVP quarterback who rushed for 234 yards in the Belk Bowl, I think is also an explosive playmaker, as well as Brian Edwards, the guy from South Carolina, is a sleeper stud who would have been arguably a day one prospect had he not dealt with injuries the past 2 years.
John, you actually had a quote on Twitter. I don't know which show you said it on or if it was in one of your articles, saying that positionless football is the next intelligent wave. And obviously, you were talking about Isaiah Simmons earlier, but again, do you think there's going to be more of that after that? Go through that theory and what it would mean for the draft, like how it would impact the draft, as well as coach and player development.
I think we saw players at least, or GMs get closer to doing that. I don't know what happened during quarantine, but clearly everyone sniffed a lot of something and came back with the idea that Lynn Bowden, a Kentucky quarterback, we're going to play him everywhere. We're going to declare him as a running back, but also he's going to be used as a wide receiver. Taysom Hill, now we get comps to Jalen Hurts being used in that role, as Carson Wentz still has a strong 2 years left on his deal with over $21 million left to make each year. Then we have Antonio Gibson, a guy who led the nation in yards after contact per attempt as a wide receiver, get declared as a running back. But we were told also he's going to be used everywhere. As if you recall, whenever Kyle Turner took over with Carolina in the last month of the season last year, he used Curtis Samuel like that. Curtis Samuel averaged 3 carries per game, which is not normal for a wide receiver. So I imagine we see Antonio Gibson used everywhere to throw off these defenses. And, just players like that. I do think OCs and GMs in general try to add chess pieces that they could confuse defenses with. If you notice, the AFC West didn't go defense. Like the Chargers, don't get me wrong, they had an amazing defense, they had an amazing offseason, but all these teams add offense now because they are just going to try to mismatch the Chiefs as opposed to stopping the Chiefs because you can't stop Patrick Mahomes. And I just think a lot of teams are now going that direction because we know the NFL is a copycat league. So the more mismatches we can create, the more confusion we can create on the field, the better it is for everyone, even the fans watching.
We are talking to analyst and writer for Roto World NFL, John Daigle. Last 2 questions for me, John. Were you surprised that Andy Dalton signed with the Cowboys a 1-year contract now that you're trying to re-sign Dak Prescott? Andy Dalton is absolutely a very reliable quarterback, and I think he would fit Mike McCarthy's offense better than Dak Prescott. And do we have an NFL season this year?
Okay, one, Andy Dalton, I was tremendously surprised. However, I think it's a tremendous fit. It's just unusual for the Cowboys. This is an organization who historically has not cared at all about backup quarterback whatsoever. And a lot of people say that's Jason Garrett. They just never tried. So much so that even Cooper Rush, who was Dak's backup last year, just got cut this morning. Just let him go because he's useless. That's how much they care. That's how little they care about backup quarterback. But go even further than that. Go to Tony Romo. How many starts did we see from Brad Johnson and just old veterans who couldn't throw the ball forward come off the bench, even though he was injury-riddled his entire career? Go back to Bill Parcells. 32-year-old Bledsoe was at the tail end of his career, and Romo was an undrafted free agent. Imagine how egregious that is nowadays. You'd get called out if you had an undrafted free agent as your backup. So this team has never once cared about a backup quarterback, even though I think it's arguably one of the most important positions in all of football. And I think it only happened honestly because of the virus and the situation we're in now. Because Andy Dalton does live in Katy, Texas. Shout out to Abuelos. They have the most amazing tres leches cake there. And if his home was not in the general area, I really think he would have landed in a place like Jacksonville or Denver for a veteran backup. But instead, he's at home. It only cost them $3 million, an absurd amount, especially considering the Bengals had the option to keep him for $17.5 million. And he's clearly a comparable backup to Dak Prescott. So, yeah, I thought it was a tremendous one. And then as for the season, I'm typically the one who likes to stay positive, so I would like to say yes. But I will say keep in mind, though, it's going to be different. It's not going to be the experience we've had in the past, since all these players are likely getting off their butts, to join and see their teammates for the first time ever in September. So it's going to be weird football, but any football is good football right now.
Last question for me, John. One team that was a last place team or below 500 team that'll be a playoff team, and then one playoff team that you think will fall off badly this year.
I think, the Chargers do this to us time and time again. They look good, they promise, and then they go away. But I do think the Chargers can compete for a wild card spot in the AFC. Even something as simple as, not Justin Herbert, but as something as simple as in a season where, again, no teammates working together until September unless it's over Zoom. So continuity here is important. And Tyrod Taylor previously led Anthony Lynn's offense in 2016 with the Bills, and they led the entire league in rushing. He knows the scheme. He's familiar working with the coach. That's already a plus. And then also just the slight improvements in their offensive line, going from an offensive line that was concerning to one that now has Trey Turner and Brian Bulaga guarding the right side as a whole. That's a plus. So I like the Chargers to sneak into the playoffs as a wild card spot. Even like Chris Harris moving to the slot, where he's arguably the best slot corner in the entire league. That's a great sign. So I love the Chargers. And then I think I have the Vikings falling out. I am concerned completely about their defense. I like the guys they added, especially getting Jeff Gladney as their number one corner off the board. That's great. But the fact is, their entire starting nickel set, Mackenzie Wayne, Trey Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, Xavier Rhodes, those guys are all gone this year. The secondary they're throwing are just a bunch of newbies. Plus, remember, they use a sub package that uses their safeties, and they don't have Andrew Sendejo anymore. They use their safeties as nickel corners. So it's just really tough to mimic that with new guys literally across the board. In a conference that will have offense, for better or worse, no matter what you can say about like the Panthers defense, right? They are going to have offense under Matt Rule, same as the Saints. NFC North. I apologize.
Don't worry, we make mistakes all the time.
The Lions still offense clearly. Aaron Rodgers still exists. There's offense there. So yes, I worry about the Vikings defense keeping up and helping them get into the playoffs. So that's my pick to fall out.
John, why don't you tell all the fans how they can find you on social media?
Yeah, you can go to Twitter. It is at @NotJDaigle, which is the worst Twitter handle ever, but I'm kind of stuck with it 10 years in the making now. So at @NotJDaigle. It's anonymous, but then again, it's not. And then subscribe to the Roto World Football podcast. And then NBC Sports. We're on every day, every Monday through Friday, 11:40 a.m. to noon, closing out the Fantasy Football Flex Show.
Awesome. John, if the season progresses and we do have an off season and we do have a football season, we would love to get you back on to talk a little Jets, Giants, and throughout the league football.
Oh, guys, if we're back on, I'm coming to the studio. What are you talking about?
That sounds good. We'll get you in.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, John.